Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session in the Researcher Toolbox webinar series. Thank you for joining us. My name is Danesh Mudli. I'm a consultant for Elsevier. I am based in Durban in South Africa, and in my role, I'm responsible for the Elsevier core products, which are Scopus, Science Direct, and Mendeley, and customers that are based in Sub-Saharan Africa. And in this researcher webinar series, we have been discussing some of the most requested topics in publishing. So as a consultant, I also do a lot of presentations for universities that's in Africa, dealing with the most new and requested topics in publishing. So in the series, we did already tackle quite a lot. And if you're interested in finding the recordings for the series, we have it uploaded on our Elsevier Africa customer portal, where you'll find if it hasn't been uploaded yet, it will be shortly. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. And I will also share the link in chat. So it's a pretty new page, so it's still a bit of a work in progress, but the link is in chat. And here, if you're looking for the recordings from the other sessions, if you scroll down to recorded webinars, the ones that are in blue are already uploaded for you. So you can just access those recordings. The ones that's in black are still being uploaded. So that will shortly be available. And below that, you have product training as well. So if you have access to Scopus, then you can get Scopus product training. And some of the sessions that we did host, like Scopus author profiles, how to find and analyze SDGs, updating your Scopus author profile, tutorials, and the responsible use of metrics. So responsible use of metrics is a recommended webinar in support of this topic, because it's important to understand the role of metrics when evaluating journals. On this hub, we also have some supporting material. So how to conduct a successful literature search. This guide will tell you quickly, what is site score, what is impact factor, SJR, SNP, and other journal metrics, article level metrics, and author level metrics. We also have some other guides here, like the Scopus Look Guide for metrics, which will give you a more detailed explanation on the actual metric that you're looking at. So we dealt with publishing a lot in the series, and we have also discussed predatory journals. We've discussed open access publishing choices. Today, we're going to be talking about how to select the right journal for you. And whenever it comes to journal selection, we always make a few recommendations to the audience, which is always read the author guide of any journal that you are hoping to publish in. The author guide will give you a lot of information about the scope of the journal, and it is recommended that you refer to this guide prior to writing your article. The reason for which is because the author guide or the author guidelines will dictate the referencing style, for example, the word count. It's always good to determine if your research fits within the scope of the journal, and then write in the journal's style or the request from the journal. So it's much more difficult to have written a 12-page article and try to condense it and amend it to suit a journal. So rather select the journal, decide on whether it suits you, it suits your research, and write in the style that is mentioned in the author guide. So that's always a good tip and important. Now, for those of you that do utilize Scopus and Science Direct, I am going to demonstrate some key things that you can look at on those platforms, which can help you with journal selection. But it's always recommended that you use both quantitative and qualitative metrics when evaluating a journal, meaning we have all of these guides on metrics and understanding them, but metrics give you an overview of a certain aspect of the performance of the journal. So maybe it will tell you average citations. Maybe it will be able to tell you about the prestige of where the citations are originating, or it will normalize for subject matter differences, like in the case of SNP. But you should not, it's not recommended that you only use metrics when you are evaluating a journal. You should also rely on qualitative aspects like getting references, speaking to research supervisors, librarians who can properly guide you as well on the journal itself. Also using accredited lists, and that brings me to Scopus. So if you do have access to Scopus, and even if you don't, you will be able to download the Scopus source list. So the reason why the Scopus source list is valuable in qualifying journals is because Scopus is the world's largest abstract and citation database, and it indexes more than 7,000 different publishers. So whenever a journal applies to be indexed on Scopus, the journal has to meet a minimum selection criteria. And once that criteria has been met, the journal is then referred to an independent content selection and advisory board to review the journal. Then only if it passes that review will it be indexed in Scopus. And even after it's indexed in Scopus, we still do periodic checks on the journal to evaluate if any of the aspects have changed or raised concern, and the list is reevaluated. So it's a dynamic list as well. So it's always good to check on it live in Scopus. But if you don't have access to the full product, you can also just download the list as it is, and you can download it at periods as well. So if you go to source on Scopus, and you can, if you have access to it, you can filter by your subject area, or you can enter in the title of the journal. You can also use the filters on Scopus to make some of your selections, like the first quartile, second quartile, third or fourth quartile, select journals only. So if this were an example, I could select second quartile and journals. And then you can look at the list of journals, and you can also see the metrics available. So this isn't for any specific subject area, but these journals are in the second quartile. These are the site scores, the percentile, the subject area, the number of citations received. How you would read this is calculated on a 4-year window, so 2018 to 2021. In this particular journal, it has a site score of 9.2, which is an Elsevier metric telling you the average citations that the documents in this journal received over a 4-year period. The highest percentile it's in the 70th percentile. It's ranked 18 out of 59 journals in catalysis. There's been 24,654 citations received between 2018 and 2021. In that same time frame, this journal published 2,678 documents. 84% of these documents have at least one citation. It has a SNP value of 1 and SJR of 1. SNP is a metric that allows you to compare journals of differing subject areas by normalizing for the differences in subject areas. And SJR is a metric that tells you about the prestige of the citing source. So the journals or the documents which originate from a journal that has cited this journal, and it gives you a value, but the presenter is going to give more information about this. This is just an overview of what you can see on Scopus in terms of metrics. And it's published by the Royal Society of Chemistry. And you can compare, if you're comparing on site score between the first two journals, this journal has a higher site score. This journal has a higher SNP value. both have 84% of the documents cited. This journal published more in this time frame than this. This journal has more citations than this. So you can evaluate it on different things. If you are evaluating, however, on SNP, of the top three, this journal has the highest SNP value. If you're evaluating on site score, this is the one with the highest. And remember, these are of different subject areas. So when you have different subject areas, you mainly will use SNP or SJR. But if it's in the same subject area, you can use the site score. But that is if you have access to Scopus and you can actually play around with the filters and create a list of your own. But if you don't, then you just simply need to download the source list, and it will give you a list of all the journals that's indexed on Scopus, as well as the metrics. So you can also do this on Excel if you don't have access. And that gives you some overview of the metrics of a journal, but it's publisher neutral, so it's not just Elsevier journals. As I said earlier, it's more than 7,000 different journals. On Science Direct, which is a full text database, what you will see on the journals page, if you have access to Science Direct, you can still access the journals and books page. So you'll be able to see what is indexed on Science Direct. So say, for instance, I'm looking at journals. I am looking at the subject area of chemistry, and I want to see the journals currently accepting submission. You can actually filter your list on that. And when you open a journal, so firstly, you'll be able to see which journals are open access, which, when it says contain open access, it means it's a subscription journal that also allows open access publishing. We call it a hybrid journal. And if it's a subscription journal, then you will not see the open access, the open access on its own. You'll see either contains or just as it is. So if I open this particular journal, for instance, you'll also get information for journal selection from the home pages that's available on Science Direct. So you will see the site score and impact factor. So it depends whichever metric you're more comfortable using. Site score is from Elsevier. It's based on a 4-year time frame, and it considers more documents than just articles. It also considers conference proceedings and data papers, book chapters. Impact factor, it's based on 2 years, and it's based on articles primarily, and it's for the average. So this is giving you an average of 12. This is giving you an average of 7.3. This is over 4 years, and this is over 2 years. But what we have improved on the homepage is that you'll also get a bit of publishing information at the bottom. So you'll see that this journal has 2 weeks to its first decision. Sorry. So this journal has 2 weeks to first decision, 3.6 weeks review time, 1 week of publication time, and it has an 18% acceptance rate. This is the editor-in-chief, and you can view the full editorial board here. And furthermore, you can also read about the journal, and that author guide that I had referred to, which is really a very important starting point, is available here. But you'll see it even on journal web pages outside of Science Direct. You will see a guide for authors, author guidelines. It's normally called different things, but it gives you the information that you need when you need to, make a selection for publishing. So that's just a little bit of background. Remember, you can also use sites like Think, Check, Submit, and Elsevier's Journal Finder if you're considering publishing with Elsevier. That is specifically for Elsevier. So with that, I just wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview of where you can find these metrics and what's available on Science Direct and Scopus. But I'm going to now stop and give this over to the actual presentation for today. Um, so this.
I'm a research intelligence consultant for Elsevier. I'm based in Cape Town. The main focus of my everyday work is how to use metrics, particularly bibliometrics, to get a better understanding of research performance. However, today my focus will be wider than bibliometrics to also cover other pertinent factors to consider when selecting a journal. Throughout my presentation, I will refer to Scopus, but I realize not everyone will be familiar with Scopus, so a short overview of Scopus will be presented at the end of the session based on your feedback. My presentation will cover 5 important aspects related to choosing a suitable journal. So we'll look at general considerations, then creating a shortlist, analyzing each journal on that shortlist, journal metrics, and then also what free resources are available to researchers on this topic. So I want to start off with, by reflecting on why choosing a journal is such a challenging part of the research life cycle. Firstly, we can blame abundance. In Ulrich's periodicals directory, which is the standard library directory, and database providing information about popular and academic magazines, as well as scholarly journals, there are more than 300,000 records. Of these, approximately 101 are active scholarly journals, and of them about 44,000 journals are peer-reviewed. So potentially this is the pool that you can select from. Secondly, this number is growing by about 3.5% annually. So the problem of abundance is not going away. Thirdly, there generally seems to be a lack of support for academics and researchers about how to select a journal that is beyond the ad hoc guidance that is provided by supervisors and peers. So before diving into the practical steps, we'll first look at some of the general considerations, before publishing. For instance, if your research project is linked to a grant, you should make sure of the funder requirements. Funder requirements typically relate to peer review, open access, and archiving, for instance, in an institutional repository, or it may also relate to archiving or sharing your research data. The tip here is to consult the following, you can consult the following researchers for finding such policies. There's Sherpa Juliet. It's a database of research funding organizations and their policies on archiving, publishing, and data archiving. There's Sherpa Romeo, which is a database of publishers' copyright and self-archiving policies. Sherpa Fact is a tool to help researchers check if the journals in which they wish to publish their results comply with the funders' requirements for open access to research. The library is also, of course, a good place to go to seek information about these kinds of policies. So essentially, though, the search for a suitable journal starts with creating a shortlist. And ideally, you should get input from different sources for your shortlist. And you can do this by analyzing your own references, asking input from your colleagues. And then a third way is to optimize your literature search and learn as much as possible about the journals that come up in your literature search. So I'll go into more detail into each of these as we go along. So taking note of the articles in of the articles in your references, is a very important tip, which cannot be stressed enough. So, the articles you are citing, the journals in which they are. So, in many cases, this leads you directly to the right journal. So, what you're citing is also usually where you will be publishing. On the screen here, we have a real example of a manuscript about the changing, the changing meaning of home in the work of South African women academics during the pandemic. And going through the references used by the author, it was clear that there were several recurring journals. So for instance, the journals we've marked all the journals in red, and going through them, we could pick up, for instance, these journal studies in higher education, equality, diversity, and inclusion, higher education, and then also gender work and organizations. So these were journals that were recurringly referenced by the author, and they were the first journals then to be added to the shortlist. The second way is, of course, then to expand. So you need to expand the shortlist, is to ask input from your supervisor if this is relevant. For he or she is often the co-author in any case and has a co-responsibility for your work. Also ask your colleagues when you're deciding where to submit, because they may be more familiar with different journals that are relevant in your field. And then thirdly, to further expand the shortlist, go back to your literature search and note the key journals which were included in the results. So one of the important principles in bibliometric is called Bradford's Law, which means that within any subject field, there's a small number of journals that produce the majority of the essential literature. So it's in any case very important to take note of this, and then also to determine the core journals of any given subject area or the subject area in which you are working. The example on the screen here shows a literature search in Scopus, which came up with 16 documents. So if you now click on the Analyze Search results, which is encircled there, you will find a summary of the most prominent journals, not in the order of site score, which gives you an indication of the quality of the journal, but in order of how many articles they published on the specific topic. Right. So usually there will be an overlap between the different steps, the input that you get from your own reference list, from asking colleagues or your supervisor, and then going back to your literature search and noting which journals came up very prominently. But this is a good sign because it shows that you are on the right track. So when you have a short list, it's now then really important to analyze and carefully evaluate each of the journals on that short list. And I propose that this investigation process be done using a decision grid, such as shown here, because this grid will guide you systematically to evaluate the suitability of each of the journals on your shortlist. So we've got 6 dimensions here. The main factors or dimensions you will be looking at will be things like legitimacy and compliance. How relevant is the journal for my topic? The feasibility, of getting published in that journal. The quality of the journal based on journal metrics. Then more practical aspects such as the duration of the process, and then if relevant also the open access availability and cost. In the next slides, I will discuss each of these dimensions in more detail, and then also indicate where to find the relevant information. So under the first dimension, legitimacy and compliance, it's important to make sure, firstly, that the publisher is reputable, and to make double sure that the journal is not predatory. Right? So predatory journals are defined as they accept articles for publication along with authors' fees without performing the promised quality checks for issues such as plagiarism or ethical approval. So here are a few ways in which predatory journals reveal themselves. Firstly, there will be false or misleading information on the journal webpage, such as fake impact factors, incorrect addresses, misrepresentation of the editorial board, false claims of indexing, etc. Also, deviation from best editorial practice and publication processes or practices such as unprofessional looking web page, where there are spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, irrelevant text. So these are also red flags. Also some, lack of transparency. So little or no information about the editorial, how the editorial decisions are made, what fees applies, how the peer review is organized. There won't be contact information or proper contact information. The editors or the editorial board members won't be verifiable. So usually in your field where you are an expert, you should recognize leaders in the field on the editorial board. But generally, just lack of transparency is a flag. Also, what happens very often with predatory journals are these, invitations to publish with them. So it's important, importantly, please note that that a journal is not necessarily predatory if it exhibits any of these flaws. These are just red flags that the journal may be predatory. To establish whether a journal is predatory, you basically have to prove that it is willfully misleading the author and taking money in the form of an article processing cost without performing publishing functions. So without any official guardian of scholarly publications available, and there's also no, one single list of predatory journals that you can consult. So researchers are advised to follow the guidance provided on Think, Check, Submit, this website, which also then offers a checklist similar to what we're going through, but more focused on the quality of the journal, a checklist of how to select journals for for publishing your research results. So I've also included here a web link on a previous webinar, webinar that was created or that was delivered in collaboration with CREST at Stellenbosch University, which gives a thorough overview of what predatory journals are, how to recognize them, and what to do about it. So that's the first thing. The second aspect around legitimacy and compliance relates to indexing. So in other words, check whether the journals on your shortlist are indexed in reputable indexes. Indexing is a form of quality, shows a form of quality control, and it also signifies more visibility and broader reach for the journal. The two most authoritative indexing services are Scopus and Web of Science. Why? Because they apply quality control. So each journal indexed in these two indexes are carefully selected and evaluated according to selection criteria. They are also designed for the purpose of research performance analysis. So they were designed for this purpose. Please note that Google Scholar, and it is also not accredited. It's a good search, it's a useful search engine, but it is not considered as an index. For universities in South Africa, it's also important to check whether a journal is accredited. So accreditation means the journals are contained are contained in 6 specific journal lists, which were sanctioned by the Department of Higher Education and Training. In fact, the department or DA pays subsidy to universities for each publication in these journals as an incentive to advance publication and scholarship. The lists are published every year on the department's webpage. These lists are then the International Bibliography of Social Sciences, the IBSS, it's Web of Science, it's the Norwegian list, the Director of Open Access Journals, CLO South Africa, and Scopus. So if you follow the link provided here, dhead.gov.za, you can find the latest accredited lists. So this is an overview of the volume of the respective lists. So each accredited list is provided here along with the number of journals that it includes. So you can note here in the total that there are more than 36,000 journals in total to choose from. So all of these journals in these lists are accredited. And you will also note here that Scopus has a very large overlap with all of these journals. The overlap with the list of South African journals is a little bit lower, and with DOAJ, the Director of Open Access Journals, a little bit smaller, but in general, it has the biggest overlap of with all of the journals, right? So checking for accreditation, it's not a vital step, but it is a step that is recommended by universities because of the subsidy that is linked to those publications. Right. So the next dimension to evaluate is relevancy, and this is a critical step because if your paper is outside of the scope of a journal that you submit to, it will be rejected immediately by the editors. Not because of the quality of the work, but just because the topic doesn't fit with the journal. So there you already waste a lot of time. You know, and this requires you to be honest and realistic with yourself about the nature and the potential impact of your work. So don't simply start, you know, by looking for the highest quality journal and then work your way down from there. Because that really diminishes your credibility with, you know, with editors and reviewers, and it wastes a lot of time. So it's a very important step to go to the journal website, find the aims and scope, and then make sure that your manuscript, your research really matches the aim and scope of the particular journal that you're looking at. So for each of the journals on your shortlist, go through this process very carefully. On the screen here, we've got 2 examples that I want to, you know, just mention. So there's gender, work, and organization on the left-hand side, which is indicating there that it is theory-driven. So I've just highlighted some of the very important clues that they're giving. It's theory-driven. They want empirical research. It's international focused. They wanted your research to be highly developed conceptually, and they will decline atheoretical and descriptive work. Right? So clear indication of what they're looking for. The other journal, the title is Work, and this journal talks about practicality. So here you've got prevention of illness and injury, you've got interventions, rehabilitation, ergonomics, challenges facing aging workforce, and they specify also the types of research studies. So they include clinical practice, case study reports, as well as narratives and critical reflections, which sounds a little bit less rigorous and less theoretical. So very important, useful clues are usually provided in the aims and scope in guiding you about whether it is relevant, whether it's a good match for your research paper. While you're going through the aims and scope, also take note of the types of manuscripts that are covered by the journal. So not all journals cover all types of manuscripts, so it will usually be indicated whether they want full articles or, original research articles, whether they accept letters and short communication or rapid communications, those research results that you want to get out very quickly to get them timestamped. Also whether they accept review papers and things like case reports. So take note of the types of manuscripts that are accepted. Also take note of, when you're going through the aims and scope, it's usually, it gives an indication of the intended audience. It may mention things like theorists, practitioners, clinicians, so you know what is the aim, where the audience will be. And then also take note of the following. So whether the journal is aimed at a large general readership, so your terminology or your research may be too technical if it's a very general readership that the journal has. Also, is your research to country specific for a journal that has a global audience? The journal's readers, experts, are they focused on experts in several subjects or more specialized? Is the journal targeting research across different fields? So, journals like Science and Nature aim for a general audience, but reading things like transdisciplinary science, for example. And then another example, New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of American Chemical Society, they aim for more specialist multidisciplinary audience. So multidisciplinary also has some, also have different dimensions. So some journals, like the Journal of Knot Theory and its ramifications, very obviously aims for a very, single-minded discipline audience. So audience, an important factor, of course. The third factor to evaluate for each journal as you go through your shortlist is the feasibility. So if all the other requirements are met, it's also important to take into consideration whether your own manuscript will match the profile of the journal. So here we look at things in terms of feasibility. We will ask questions like, what is the regional or geographic orientation of the journal? Right, so which countries are the authors from? And also, what is the prevalence of the home country? So if your research is country focused, for example, what is the prevalence of the home country authors within the journal? Are there, for instance, South African authors publishing in the journal? Does the journal have a predisposition towards international collaboration? Also, is the journal read or cited by home country authors? So all of those kinds of things just give you an idea of the authorship and the relevancy in that aspect. So to answer these questions about feasibility, we look towards citation databases such as Scopus, to provide us in-depth information which provides in-depth information about each of the journals that it indexes. So on this slide shows the homepage of Scopus, and then at the top you can see encircled sources, and where you'll retrieve a list of all the journals indexed by searching for a title or by a subject. Right. So this is going into the journal from a more analytical perspective to see who is publishing in that journals and what is the chance of the journal accepting my paper if they have never accepted a South African paper, for example. So you want to get that insight into the journal. So to do this, Scopus can be used, and because it provides for each journal, there's a profile page, which then provides information about the content of the journal. And this includes the site score tracker, which is encircled there. So site score tracker is based on recent citations and documents. So by clicking on the document count and then subsequently also then clicking on analyze search results encircled there, you will find the documents per country, which provides insight into the journal's regional orientation. So there's your documents per country, which will give you an indication of where the authors are coming from that are publishing in this journal. So this will also show whether the journal is popular amongst the local audience, if it's a local audience that you want to, or a more local audience that you want to reach. Sorry, let me just go back. So the same is also, so the same goes then for citations. So if in the first block here, if you click on the citations to date, and subsequently also on the analyze search results, you will find a profile of the countries that are citing those, so the authors might be from the US, UK, Australia, but they are being cited by China, South Africa, South Korea, which is exactly what you want to know. So what is the chances of your paper being cited? So who's the readership of this journal? So check the documents, who's publishing, and then also check who's citing in those papers. There are many ways of doing this kind of analysis. This is just one of the ways that you can that can be used to do this kind of analysis in Scopus. Right. So the next on the grid then is quality. So as I mentioned in the beginning, metrics are not the focus here for selecting a journal. However, usually your career advancement will also depend to some extent on the status of the journals in which you publish. So quality journals are characterized by consistently publishing papers that command broad interest from academics. They yield a lot of citations. So it gives them status. So although it is controversial, funding organizations, universities, committees routinely use the quality of journals as a measure of success. So as an aid, I've got some movement here on my screen. So as an aid to uncovering the quality of journals, several metrics have been developed. So there are quite a few. I'm just going to refer to a few of the metrics. So firstly, what are journal metrics? So they are quantitative methods to evaluate the quality of journals. It's based on citation analysis, whereby the popularity of the journal is reflected by the number of citations related to the average journal or the average article in the journal. It's also based on the premise that a citation to a paper is a form of endorsement, and the number of citations with a particular paper, the number of citations which a particular paper attracts, then is therefore regarded as an indication of importance. So various different methodologies and data sources are used for journal metrics. And the aim of journal metrics is basically to help researchers to select a journal to read, and also in terms of publishing. The impact factor is the most well-known journal metric. It was first introduced by Eugene Garfield in the 1960s. It's published by Clarivate in its database Journal Citation Reports. It's not available in Scopus. It shows the average number of citations of the published paper in a particular journal. So to calculate the impact factor of a journal, the number of citations received in a given year is divided by the documents published in the preceding 2 or 5 years. So there are 2 citation windows available. There's a 5-year and a 5-year and a 2-year citation window. In Scopus, we have developed CiteScore. It was first introduced in 2016 and then updated in 2020. As an example here, we have the CiteScore for the South African Journal of Science, which is 2.2, which means that over a 4-year period, articles are cited 2.2 times. So CiteScore uses a 4-year citation window. Citations received over a 4-year period are counted and then divided by the number of documents published in the same period. It's based on the premise that a citation to a paper is a form of endorsement, as I mentioned, and this indicator then helps you to differentiate between journals. Sorry, let me just continue. It's just a slight hiccup here on my side. Right, so CiteScore can also be used to rank journals. So the first image here shows that the list of journals indexed in Scopus. To the left, you can see there's a filter, so it's encircled there. There's a filter for quartiles. And this allows you to identify journals that are amongst the top 25% highest ranking based on the CiteScore percentile. So the second image here then shows you how Scopus allows you to differentiate between a set of journals using the feature compare metrics and view CiteScore, SJR, and SNP. So I haven't discussed SJR and SNP. These are normalized journal metrics, which allows you to compare journals across subject areas because the citation culture of subject areas are not the same. So it's also important when you're comparing across different subject areas to use normalized journal metrics. But usually when you are looking for a journal in your own field of research, a CiteScore would be fine to use because you will be looking within a specific subject area. Using journal metrics is a good way to differentiate between journals which already have a good fit to your manuscript, but now you want to know, you want to consider which one of them are higher in quality in terms of the citations that they attract. So then moving on to the fifth dimension, which is duration. So it is important also to take note when analyzing your shortlisted journals, what is the duration that you should be expecting? Knowing that average acceptance rate of a journal, as well as the expected duration from submission to publication is also useful to understand because it gives an indication of the level of the journal. Acceptance rate usually is to some degree is a reflection of the quality of the journal. High-end journals get more submissions and they often have to reject a high number of journals. But this information is also useful in terms of managing your expectations. So metrics about acceptance and duration are usually provided on the journal website as well. So it's not always available and you have to search for it a little bit, but it is usually available. On this slide, you can see, for example, a journal which has an acceptance rate of 5%, 62 days until the first decision, and then 134 days until the first post-review decision. Right? So clearly, this is important information. So for your own expectation, and also, that rejection rate should also give you an insight into the chances of being accepted in the journal. And then in your evaluation of the shortlisted journals, it is finally also important to note whether the journal facilitates open access and what the cost is. So the information is usually available on the journal website. or on the publisher's website as shown on the slide here. And may be found on the Sherpa sites that I mentioned earlier. So the journal in the example here is an Elsevier journal. It's called Research Policy. Just going through the website, you find the heading Open Access Options. And then it gives you information about, what are the options. And then also, as you scroll down, there's also information about the cost. So remember that universities sometimes have agreements with publishers to waive article processing costs. So it's also important to contact the library to find out whether such an agreement is in place. So the library is a good source of information about that. Contacting the publisher directly is another option. So the end result of your analysis will, look something like this. So although here I only shown one journal, where you would have probably between 5 and 10 on your shortlist. So the grid, therefore, then, just providing a structured format to capture the essential information about the most, about the journal that is most suitable in terms of, so that you can capture that information and find what is the most suitable, looking at it across the different dimensions. So legitimacy and compliance, relevancy, feasibility, quality, duration, and open access. So an important advice that we'd like to also share is that it is very important not to gamble by submitting your manuscript to more than one journal at a time. International ethics standards prohibit this, so it's not allowed to do multiple submissions, and editors do find out about this. So authors are generally also required to tick a box to say that they are not currently, that the journal is not currently under consideration for publication with another journal. So if an untrue answer is put in here, then it basically comes down to professional fraud. And then, as a final word, publication in high impact journals is not the be all and end all. So what matters most is that your research reaches the intended audience. So to go through this process very in a very structured way is important. But if you do aspire to high impact journals, remember this is usually, it requires patience. It's a gradual process of honing your skills, getting experience, getting to know the journals on your topic well, and then progressing one step at a time. There are various resources available to assist you. I'm going to mention only a few. So there are publisher tools, for example, the Elsevier Journal Finder. So it helps you find an Elsevier journal that suits your publishing based on using information about the journal. It uses smart search technology and field of research specific vocabularies also to match your article to an Elsevier journal. So you basically provide your title and the abstract and your own keywords, and the search engine then, or the algorithm, tries to make a match with the journal. There are also other publisher tools. So EndNote Match is one of them. There's Journal Author Name Estimator. There's Springer Journal Suggester. There's Publish or Flourish, which is focused on open access. So look out for the publisher tools to assist in making those kinds of matches between manuscript and suitable journal. I also want to mention Researcher Academy, which provides a wealth of information on where to publish. So go to www.researcheracademy.com, and there's a variation of capacity building. So you can look for a course, a recorded presentation, etc. But really a wealth of information. So do look into this. Right. So with this, we've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. So I look forward to hear feedback about any of the questions that you have, and I hope this has been useful.
So with that, I'm going to open for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. You have the Q&A box. So we'll just wait a few minutes to see if any questions come through. And just to further some of Lucia's points, I'm going to share my screen now. So we know this. You guys are welcome, of course. And just going to share my screen on one last point. So with Elsevier, if you're thinking about publishing with Elsevier, we have this program in place, which is called the Author Heroes Program. So rejection is really disappointing and something that every researcher does not want to ever have to deal with, but it is a reality in the publishing process. And what Elsevier has done is, if your paper does not get accepted by a journal, you will be assigned an author hero who, if the paper is still suitable for another journal, will be in touch with you and help you to handle that and refer that article to another journal from Elsevier as well that might be more suited to. So it's part of our article transfer service. Author heroes step in at the point of rejection, providing tailored editorial guidance and journal recommendations that are likely to lead to publication in another Elsevier journal. Okay, so we still have that program in place. Okay, just double checking the chat box. There's a lot of feedback. Okay, we will get an email with the link to get a certificate for the session. If you registered for the session, it will be sent to the email address at which you registered. Okay, so we finished a few minutes early. So thank you very, very much for attending this Researcher Toolbox webinar series. Then please try and register for the next event that we will be hosting. We do host this once monthly, and again, we deal with the most requested topics in publishing. The next event in our series will be harnessing your author profile. So we will have a speaker from Scopus to discuss your author profile on Scopus and how to make sure that it is updated and you get the most benefit out of it. So please try and register for that. That is on the 8th of September. But thank you so much for attending the session. When should one start looking for a journal? When you're ready with your research process to begin writing your article, before you start writing your article, I would recommend looking for a journal. Sometimes when I found that the reviewing duration of the journal is 3 weeks, sometimes it takes more than 2 months. So where are the problems? When there's a delay in the reviewing process, generally it's because the reviewers are either there's a lack of reviewers or the reviewers haven't come back with feedback. Remember that reviewers are also, people that volunteer. They have full-time jobs as well. So sometimes it's quite difficult. And if it's a very specific field, then there may be quite few reviewers available as well. So that is generally where the delay lies. Thank you for your questions and wishing you a great afternoon forward. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.